In the darkest hour of Islam, when assassins crept towards the Prophet's peace be upon chamber, one man stood alone between them and the messenger of God. Unarmed, wounded, and unwavering, this is the story of a pledge written in blood, a night of terror, and the warrior who guarded the Prophet's door. The air in the alleyways of Medina was thick with the heat of betrayal. It was the year 5 AH, and the fledgling Muslim community had just returned from the disastrous Battle of Zuhd. The scent of loss was everywhere in the bandages stained crimson, in the quiet sobs that escaped homes mourning their martyrs, and in the heavy steps of the Prophet, Muhammad peace be upon himself, who bore the physical wound of a cracked helmet and the profound grief of losing his beloved uncle, Hamza. In this atmosphere of collective pain and vulnerability, a new threat was coalescing in the shadows. The tribes of Adal and Al-Qara came to the Prophet peace be upon professing a desire to learn Islam. They requested teachers. Trusting their sincerity, the Prophet peace be upon sent 6 of his finest companions as envoys. Among them was a man named Asim ibn Thabit, a warrior, poet known for his archery and his unwavering faith. They were led by a dedicated teacher, Al-Mund, here Ibn Amr. The scene shifts to a place called Ar-Aji, a well along the caravan route. The betrayal was swift and brutal. The seekers of guidance ambushed the unarmed teachers, their true intention revealed, to capture the Muslims and sell them in the slave markets of Mecca. A fierce struggle ensued. 3 of the Sahaba, including Al-Mund here, fought until they were killed. The remaining 3, Asim among them, refused to be taken alive for dishonor. Asim, remembering a vow he had made never to be touched by a polytheist, fought with terrifying valor. His final words were a prayer, "O Allah, inform your prophet about us." The attackers could not claim his body. Asim fell, and as they approached, a swarm of bees sent by divine decree enveloped his form, protecting the martyr from mutilation. The heavens had heard his plea. News of the atrocity reached Medina like a physical blow, but the conspiracy was deepening. The chieftains of the Quraysh in Mecca, Abu Sufyan and Safwan ibn Umayyah, fueled by vengeance for their losses at Badr and Uhud, hatched a plot of chilling audacity. They commissioned a professional assassin. His name was Amr ibn Umayyah ad-Damri, but the man they turned to for this darkest of tasks was a Bedouin from the tribe of Ghatafan, known for his stealth and ruthlessness. His target was not an army, but one heart, the heart of the entire Ummah. His mission, to enter Medina and murder the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon in his own home. Back in Medina, the Prophet letter, FDFA gathered his companions. The grief for the martyrs of Ar-Aji was raw. A young man, not yet 20, stood among them. His name was Talha ibn Ubaydillah. He was not the eldest, nor the most vocal, but his eyes burned with a fire of devotion that had been kindled the day he first heard the call of Tawheed. He had missed the pledge of Aqaba, but when the Prophet peace be upon arrived in Medina, Talha was among the first to clasp his hand in a pledge of another kind, a pledge of total protection. Now, with the city on edge, the Prophet peace be upon spoke of the looming danger. He asked for volunteers for a vital duty, to guard the approaches to the Muslim quarters and his own dwelling through the treacherous night. Hands shot up. Among the most fervent was Talha's. He was assigned, along with others like Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas and Uzayd ibn Hudayr, to patrol. But for Talha, patrolling was not enough. As night fell, casting long, sinister shadows, a conviction settled in his soul. The door to the Prophet's peace be upon chamber was wood and bolt, a flimsy barrier against a determined blade. The true shield, he knew, had to be flesh and bone. Silently, without seeking permission or praise, Talha took his position. He sat with his back against the very wood of the Prophet's door. He drew his sword, laying it across his lap. His ears strained for any sound beyond the crickets. His eyes pierced the moonlit darkness. He was the final line. No one would reach the beloved of Allah unless they passed over his lifeless body. The greatest service is often rendered in silence, without expectation of recognition. Talha teaches us that true love for the Prophet, peace be upon, manifests in a willingness to become a living, breathing sacrifice for his protection. His vigil was not just a military post. It was an act of worship, a translation of faith into a shield of devotion. The night was a living entity, heavy and watchful. In the small home adjacent to the masjid, the Prophet, peace be upon, and his family slept, or tried to. The weight of leadership, the fresh mourning for the martyrs, and the unspoken tension of threat hung in the quiet air. Just a few feet away, separated only by a wall and a door, Talha ibn Ubaydillah sat sentinel. His muscles ached from the day's labors, but his spirit was taut as a bowstring. Every rustle of a palm frond, every distant howl of a desert fox, was a potential dagger creeping closer. He replayed the stories of the Sahaba in his mind, the courage of Hamza at Uhud, the wisdom of Abu Bakr, the youthful zeal of Ali. Where do I stand among these giants? He wondered. His answer was immediate here at this door. This is my battlefield. Meanwhile, slithering through the outskirts of Medina was the hired blade Ghifar. He was a specter, using every rock and ditch for cover. His mind was not on faith or empire, but on the hefty purse of gold promised by Safwan ibn Umayyah. To him, the apostate of the Quraysh in Yathrib was just a target. He reached the cluster of dwellings, his eyes scanning. The Prophet's house was known to all. He moved with lethal intent, a serpent coiling to strike. Back at the door, Talha's eyelids grew heavy. A profound fatigue washed over him. He pinched his own thigh, the sharp pain a temporary ally. No, he whispered to himself, this is not a time for sleep. What if, in a moment of weakness, the unthinkable happens? He began to pray silently, the words of the Quran flowing through his heart. Indeed, my prayer, my rites of sacrifice, my living and my dying are for Allah, Lord of the worlds. This vigil was his living, and, if necessary, his dying. Suddenly, a sound, not the wind, a subtle scrape of sandal against gravel, coming from the direction of the masjid's empty courtyard. Talha's breath froze. He slowly, silently, rose to a crouch, his hand tightening on the hilt of his sword. His heart hammered against his ribs, a drum of war. He peered into the gloom. There, a shadow detached itself from a larger shadow. A human form, hunched and moving with predatory grace towards the door. Talha's blood ran cold, then hot with a fury that was entirely pure. This was it. The threat was real, and it was here. Ghifar had found his mark. He saw the simple door. In his mind, he was already inside, his dagger finding its mark. A quick kill, a swift escape, and a life of wealth. He took a final, silent step, his hand reaching for the door's latch. Stop. The word was not shouted. It was low, firm, and carried the weight of absolute resolve. It came from the darkness beside the door. Ghifar jerked back, his eyes widening. A man materialized from the shadows, standing fully now between him and his prize. Talha's frame, though young, seemed to fill the entire space. The moonlight glinted off the unsheathed steel in his hand. You go no further, Talha said, his voice eerily calm. Ghifar, a professional, assessed quickly. One guard. Young, He could be rushed. With a guttural snarl, the assassin lunged, his own dagger aiming for Tal, his throat. What followed was not a long, clashing duel. It was a brutal, close quarters struggle of life and death in the sacred silence of the Prophet's doorstep. Metal scraped against metal. Grunts of effort were the only soundtrack. Tal fought not with the practiced skill of a veteran, but with the desperate, boundless strength of a lover defending his beloved. He was not just defending a man, he was defending the light of guidance for all of humanity. This thought unleashed a power within him. He parried a vicious thrust, and with a powerful twist of his wrist, he disarmed the assassin, sending the dagger clattering into the night. Enraged and desperate, Ghifar threw himself at Talha, grappling him. They fell to the ground, a tangle of limbs. Talha's head struck the stone step with a sickening thud. Pain exploded in his skull, but he did not relinquish his grip. He held on, shouting now, "O people of the household, to me." The commotion erupted like thunder in the silent night. Doors flung open. The companions on patrol, Saad and Zuhd, came running, their swords drawn. From inside the house, the Prophet, peace be upon himself, emerged, followed by a concerned Ali and Fatima. Lanterns were lit, flooding the scene. They found Talha pinned beneath the struggling assassin, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead, but his arms locked around Ghifar in an unbreakable hold. In an instant, the other Sahaba seized the assassin, dragging him off. The Prophet, peace be upon, rushed to Talha. He knelt beside his young defender, his blessed hands cradling Talha's face. He saw the blood, the bruise already forming, the wild, alert eyes slowly softening as they focused on the face of the one he had saved. "Talha," the Prophet, peace be upon, said, his voice thick with an emotion that shook every witness. He looked from Talha's wounded face to the subdued assassin, and then to the door that had remained unbreached. In that moment, he understood the entirety of the sacrifice that had just unfolded on his threshold. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Talha faced a professional killer alone, in the dark, armed with nothing but Iman. His story tells us that when we are protecting what is sacred, our faith, our honor, our principles, Allah grants us strength that transcends our physical limits. The true battle is fought at the doorstep of our commitments. The lantern light flickered over the faces of the gathered Sahaba, casting dramatic shadows. The captured assassin, Ghifar, hung his head in defeat, his plot unraveled in the most humiliating way, not by an army, but by a single, resolute youth. But all eyes were on the center of the scene, the Prophet, peace be upon, tending to Talha. With tender care, the Prophet, peace be upon, wiped the blood from Talha's brow. His touch was a balm more potent than any medicine. The pain seemed to recede under the warmth of that merciful hand. Then the messenger of Allah, peace be upon, did something that etched this moment into eternity. He looked at Talha, and with a smile that held oceans of gratitude and love, he gave him a title, a name that would become his crown for all time. Talhat al-Kar, the Prophet, peace be upon, proclaimed, Talha the good, and Talhat al-Fayyad, Talha the overflowing. A murmur of awe and approval rippled through the companions. To be renamed by the Prophet, peace be upon, was an honor of the highest degree. Al-Kar, the good, spoke to the essence of his character. Al-Fayyad, the overflowing, captured the moment perfectly. His courage, his loyalty, his very life had overflowed to protect the source of all goodness. But the Prophet, peace be upon, was not finished. He then uttered words that would define Talha's legacy in the cosmic register. wa Talhatu ash-Shahid al-Hayy, and Talha the living martyr. The companions fell silent, absorbing the weight of this. A Shahid, a martyr, was the pinnacle of a believer's aspiration, a title earned in the final breath on the battlefield. Yet here was Talha, alive and breathing, being awarded it by the tongue of prophethood. It meant his action that night was equivalent to martyrdom in the sight of Allah. His blood, though shed only slightly, had the value of blood spilled in the path of God. He was a martyr walking among men. In that moment, Talha ibn Ubaydillah was transformed. The young man who had wondered about his place among the giants now had his answer inscribed by the pen of prophethood. He was the living martyr, the guardian of the door. The following days saw a shift in Talha. The quiet determination remained, but now it was alloyed with a profound humility. He did not boast of his title. Instead, he carried it as a sacred trust, a constant reminder of the standard to which he must now live. He became a pillar in the community, known not just for that one night, but for a lifetime of overflowing goodness. We see him in the market, ensuring fair trade. We see him in the masjid, listening intently to the revelations. We see him with Abu Bakr and Umar, offering counsel. His wealth, which was considerable from his successful trade, became a river of charity. He was famously among the Mu'allafati Qulubihum, those whose hearts were being reconciled to Islam, whom the Prophet, peace be upon, generously gave from the spoils of war, and Talha, in turn, gave it all away to those in need. One poignant story captures his spirit. After the Battle of Uhud, when the Prophet, peace be upon, was injured and rumors of his death spread, many warriors scattered in confusion. But Talha had done something extraordinary. He had fought ferociously to shield the Prophet, peace be upon, taking multiple wounds. His hand was severely injured, permanently crippled as he deflected blows. On that day, he also carried Abu Bakr on his back to safety when he was injured. The Prophet, peace be upon, later said of Uhud, "The one who pleased me most on that day was Talha." The door of the house was not his only post. Wherever the Prophet, peace be upon, was, his soul stood guard. His life became a seamless extension of that nightly vigil, protecting the faith, supporting the community, and serving the Ummah with his wealth, his counsel, and his crippled yet powerful hands. A single moment of true sincerity can define a lifetime and echo in eternity. Talha's story teaches us that Allah's rewards are not always deferred until the hereafter. Sometimes He grants a glimpse of His pleasure in this very world through the honored words of His messenger. Our duty is to act with that level of sincerity, to be overflowing in our goodness, and let Allah choose the title by which we will be remembered. Years flowed like the waters of a blessed stream. The Prophet, peace be upon, returned to his Lord, leaving a community anchored in guidance, but sailing into uncharted seas. The era of the rightly guided caliphs began. Talha, the living martyr, now a seasoned elder statesman, watched as the ship of the Ummah navigated mighty waves under the stewardship of Abu Bakr and then Umar al-Faruq. His role evolved from a personal guard to a guardian of the legacy. He was a key advisor in the Council of Shura, his wisdom sought after. He helped mobilize armies during the wars of apostasy and the conquests. His wealth continued to flow, financing expeditions and feeding the poor. He remained Talhat al-Fayyad, the overflowing, but the world around him was changing. The immense victories brought new complexities, new tensions simmering beneath the surface of a vast empire. Then came the caliphate of Uthman ibn Affan. Trials multiplied. Dissent, fueled by political intrigue and the whisperings of opportunists, grew into a terrible storm. Talha, along with other senior companions like Az-Zubayr, found themselves in an agonizing position. They were critical of some of Uthman's policies and the conduct of his governors. Yet they fiercely defended his right to the caliphate and his person. When the rebels besieged Uthman's house, Talha was among those who tried to reason with them, to send help, to break the siege. He even sent his own sons to guard Uthman's door, an echo of his own legendary vigil. But the tide of chaos was too strong. The unthinkable happened. The Khalifa, a companion, was martyred in his home. The Ummah was plunged into its first great fitna tribulation. The shockwave tore at the very fabric of the community. In the vacuum of leadership that followed, the people of Basra pledged allegiance to Talha and Az-Zubair, while the people of Kufa pledged to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Both were among the 10 promised paradise. Both were brothers who had fought side by side for decades. Now, a tragic series of miscommunications, suspicions, and the machinations of the true instigators of fitna, the Khawarij, led them to confrontation. The scene shifted to the plain of Basra, at a place called the Camel's Pass. 2 armies of believers stood facing each other, their hearts heavy with dread. Talha, now an older man, rode out. His mind must have traveled back to the doorstep in Medina. How did we come to this? He must have anguished, from guarding the Prophet's door to facing his cousin and son-in-law on a battlefield. His intention, as history clarifies from trustworthy narrations, was not war with Ali. He and Az-Zubair had sought justice for Uthman's murder and wanted a shura. But the wheels of conflict, once set in motion by third parties, were hard to stop. As efforts for peace were underway, the battle was forced upon them by elements beyond their control. The fighting erupted. In the heat of the chaos, Talha, the veteran of Zuhd and the guardian of doors, rode into the fray with a heavy heart. He did not seek to kill fellow Muslims. He fought, perhaps, out of a sense of trapped obligation, a leader caught in the whirlwind of his followers' actions. Then it happened. An arrow, fired not from the ranks of Ali's army, but from the shadows by a man named Marwan ibn al-Hakam, a man with his own bitter grudges from Uthman's era, found its mark. It struck Talha in the leg, severing a major artery. He fell from his horse. The world, the noise of battle, began to fade. As his lifeblood seeped into the dust of the plain, a profound peace descended upon him. The titles echoed in his soul: Talhat al-Kar, Talhat al-Fayyad, and finally, the sweetest of all, Ash-Shahid al-Hayy, the living martyr. For decades he had carried that title, a walking testament to a night of supreme devotion. Now the living was being gently lifted. The prophecy was coming full circle. He was not dying as a combatant in a civil strife in the eyes of Allah. He was finally completing the martyrdom that had been credited to him the night he guarded the door. His final thoughts, as related by historians, were of that door, of the face of the Prophet, peace be upon, illuminated by lantern light, of the words of love spoken to him. He passed away, a martyr in the truest sense, his record sealed with the seal he had earned in his youth. When Ali ibn Abi Talib, upon hearing of his death, came to the body of his fallen brother, he stood in silent grief. He wiped the dust from Talha's face and said, with tears in his eyes, "I longed for this brother of mine. I have heard the messenger of Allah, peace be upon, say, Talha and Az-Zubair are my neighbors in paradise. The warrior who guarded his door in life would be his neighbor forever in the eternal abode." Talha ibn Ubaidillah's life is a profound symphony composed of 2 defining notes: unwavering vigilance and overflowing goodness. He teaches us that heroism is not a single act, but a posture of the soul. It begins in the quiet moments of choice, choosing to stand guard when others sleep, choosing to give when others hoard, choosing to remain loyal in times of peace, and wrestling with conscience. And, though wrapped in the tragedy of fitna, does not diminish his radiance. It completes the circle of his prophetic title. He entered history as the living martyr and departed as the martyred living. His story screams to us across centuries. The highest honor is to make your life a shield for what is right and a fountain of good for others. In an age where commitment is shallow and loyalty is fleeting, be a Talha. Stand guard at the door of your faith. Let your goodness overflow, and know that a single night of sincere sacrifice can illuminate a lifetime and echo in eternity, making you a neighbor of the prophets in a garden where no door will ever need guarding again. Was your heart moved by Talha's sacrifice? This is just one story from the golden generation. Subscribe to Sahaba Companion Stories and hit the bell. Journey with us as we bring to life the timeless lessons of faith, courage, and love from those who walked with the Prophet. Peace be upon